First thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. That's the famous quote from the William Shakespeare play. Now, President Trump is not literally killing attorneys. However, he is taking action to send a clear message to attorneys that were involved in prior prosecutions against him and attorneys who he believes are handling cases that are not in line with his political agenda. This list not only includes private attorneys, but also includes attorneys that are actively working under his Department of Justice. So, let's brush up on our Shakespeare and join me in a legal deep dive into President Donald Trump's legal warfare against attorneys around the country. What's good, people? We are at a point that I consider an inflection point in our legal system. I'm going to start by requoting from William Shakespeare's Henry VI, the famous quote, "The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers." Now, while most people think that's a joke that implies somehow that attorneys are the scourge of society, actually, when you understand that quote in the context it was given, nothing could be further from the case. In the Shakespearean play, Henry VI, there's a character that wants to overthrow the king and wants the entirety of the kingdom to worship him as their lord. In order to facilitate this character's attempt at tyranny, one of his henchmen, the murderous Dick the Butcher, in an attempt to help him with this plot, says, "The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers." The meaning behind that statement is they both understand that lawyers are the first line of defense against tyranny in any country. And in order for their plan to succeed, they must remove all potential defenders of justice in society. Hence, let's kill all the lawyers. And what we're seeing right now by this administration is targeting attorneys that they deem as past threats or future enemies against this administration and their agenda. First, let's talk about attorney Amir Mike. He's an immigration and civil rights attorney. He represents someone that was arrested during a pro-Palestine protest in a case that received national media attention. Mac was returning from a family trip and detained at the airport by the FBI for over 90 minutes. Now, this attorney is a United States citizen that neither committed a crime nor was under investigation for a crime. However, he was detained by the FBI without a warrant while they grilled him about his clients and demanded to see the contacts in his telephone. Now, surprisingly enough, this attorney knew his rights under this set of circumstances. He kept a cool head and gave the minimum level of cooperation with the FBI. However, he refused to let them search his telephone. In my opinion, this definitely sent a message to attorneys that handle civil rights and immigration cases that receive significant media attention in the Trump administration, which tells them they may be put in the crosshairs of the Trump administration if they continue to take these cases. Next, let's talk about Department of Justice attorney Liz Oyer. This attorney was a 15-year veteran of the Department of Justice. Attorney Oyer was fired after not recommending that actor Mel Gibson have his gun rights restored. It should be noted that the lethal weapon Mel Gibson is a very public supporter of President Trump. Now, in the wake of hundreds of career Department of Justice prosecutors either being fired or resigning, Oyer was scheduled to testify in front of a congressional hearing investigating this wave of departures in the Department of Justice. Oyer testified that days before she was scheduled to give her testimony, armed United States Marshals came to her home and delivered to her a letter indicating all the risks and warning her against testifying in this investigation. And there can be no doubt that this letter was clearly an attempt to intimidate her to prevent her from testifying before Congress. Next, let's look at the case involving Department of Justice attorney Arez Ravini. In the ongoing battle between the Trump Department of Justice and the federal court involving allegations that the Department of Justice willfully divided the court's order and wrongfully deported a man, Ravini was the attorney representing the Department of Justice. Now, this judge held multiple hearings trying to get a clear answer from the Department of Justice regarding how this happened. Now, this attorney representing the Department of Justice was never given any real answers or information, and the Department of Justice kept sending him back to court time and time again with no information. As you can imagine, the judge got frustrated and chastised the Department of Justice attorney for continually showing up to court with no information and no documentation. This attorney, frustrated himself, conceded to the court that the Department of Justice had not given him any information despite his multiple requests. Shortly thereafter, this attorney was fired from the Department of Justice, the reason being he was not being an aggressive, zealous advocate for the Department of Justice. Translation: if you're going to work for the Department of Justice, you need to be prepared to ignore your legal obligation to be honest and candid with the court. Be prepared to stonewall, lie, mislead if you want to keep your job. Now let's talk about Leticia James. She is quite a colorful character. Leticia James is the New York Attorney General who famously sued Trump and obtained a $450 million civil verdict against him for fraudulent conduct in obtaining loans for his properties. Trump got hammered so bad, and filing the appeal, he almost lost one of his famous golf courses. Now, he has referred her for criminal prosecution based on allegations of mortgage fraud for property she bought over 20 years ago. In fact, one transaction they're looking at occurred back in 1983. Now, I want to be clear. I do believe Leticia James has probably been involved in some somewhat shady conduct that came to light in some of the prior prosecutions involving Trump. And to be fair, if there's evidence of inappropriate conduct, then some action should be taken against her. However, I think we all can be certain that the Federal Housing Authority did not randomly look through mortgage applications from 20 and 30 years ago and stumble across Leticia James's applications. There's only one reasonable explanation for how this came about. Someone in the Trump administration said, look through all her records, dig through everything, and see if we can find something to use against her to either prosecute her or discredit her. I'm going to call it like I see it. Weaponizing the federal government to target attorneys that President Trump sees as prior or future threats is an existential threat to our democracy. Attorneys are the one class of people in this country that have the legal knowledge and skills to use the courts to bar tyranny and dictatorship in this country and to protect the rights of the individuals. So, if you want tyranny and unchecked power by the government in this country, then yes, first thing you do, let's kill all the lawyers. Do you think the Department of Justice is targeting attorneys they perceive as a threat to their political agenda and a potential enemy? Or do you agree that William Shakespeare was correct, that attorneys are the best line of defense protecting individuals from tyranny within society? Do me a favor, post your comments and call it like you see it. That's it. Well, that's all I got, but I do appreciate you taking the time to join me on this legal deep dive. I think it's always fun to discuss these topics, tell you what I think, and get your feedback. I would really appreciate it if you took the time to like the video, subscribe to the podcast, and also I'd appreciate you sending me your comments so we can discuss the topics you want to hear about. That's it.